You have felt it before. A certainty that arrived before the evidence did. A pull away from something you could not explain. A dream that dissolved by morning but left a feeling that stayed with you for days. You walked into a room and knew, before a single word was spoken, that something was wrong. You thought of someone you had not spoken to in years, and your phone rang an hour later. You cannot prove any of it. You're not even sure you believe in it. But it keeps happening. And here is the thing that no one tells you. Science has been quietly studying this for decades. Not the tabloid version, not the version that involves crystals and late-night infomercials. The real version. The version that uses brain scanners and controlled laboratory experiments and peer-reviewed data. And what it has found sits right at the edge of everything your rational mind thinks it knows about how perception works.
Some people do appear to know things before they logically should. The question is not whether it happens. The question is what it actually is. Start with what your brain is doing right now, in this moment, without your permission or awareness. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio at the University of Southern California spent years studying patients with damage to the part of the brain responsible for integrating emotional signals with decision-making. What he found changed the way scientists think about intuition entirely. His patients were intelligent. They could reason, they could analyze, but they could not make good decisions. Because the part of their brain that was generating what Damasio called somatic markers, subtle bodily signals that register patterns below the level of conscious awareness, was no longer functioning. Without those signals, every decision required exhaustive conscious deliberation, and even then, they kept choosing badly.
Your body is tracking patterns your conscious mind has not yet named. Think about what that means. Every experience you have ever had, every face you have ever read, every room you have ever walked into, every conversation that ended badly or well, all of it has been logged by systems in your brain that operate entirely outside your awareness. These systems are constantly comparing the present moment against an enormous archive of pattern data. And when the present moment matches a pattern that previously ended in danger or in joy or in betrayal, your body responds. Your heart rate shifts. Your gut tightens. Something moves in you before your conscious mind has assembled the words to describe what it is noticing.
You call that feeling intuition. Your nervous system calls it pattern recognition. Now, go deeper, because this is where it gets genuinely strange. Psychologist Daryl Bem at Cornell University published a paper in 2011 that sent the scientific community into a controlled crisis. The study was called Feeling the Future. Over a decade of experiments involving more than 1,000 participants, Bem found evidence that people's physiological responses sometimes occurred before the stimulus that should have caused them. Participants showed measurable arousal responses to emotionally charged images before those images were randomly selected and displayed. The effect was small. It was contested fiercely. Other researchers struggled to replicate it cleanly. But the data existed, and it was published in one of the most rigorous peer-reviewed journals in social psychology, and it has never been cleanly explained away.
Something is happening at the edges of what your instruments can currently measure. But you do not need to accept any claim about precognition to understand why some people seem to sense things before they happen. Because most of what looks like sensing the future is actually something far more interesting. It is the product of an extraordinarily sophisticated unconscious processing system that has access to far more information than your conscious mind receives. Consider how much you are not consciously registering right now. Research by cognitive neuroscientist Morten Overgaard at Aarhus University in Denmark suggests that the brain processes a vast amount of sensory information that never reaches conscious awareness. Your eyes are picking up micro-expressions on faces that last less than 1/5 of a second, too fast for your conscious mind to register, but not too fast for your nervous system to log and respond to. Your auditory system is detecting subtle tonal shifts in voices that carry emotional information your conscious mind will never name. Your body is reading the room through channels your rational mind does not have access to. And some people are better at listening to those signals than others. This is the piece that most explanations leave out. The ability to sense things before they happen is not equally distributed. It is not a mystical gift assigned randomly at birth. It is a capacity that exists on a spectrum, and where you fall on that spectrum is shaped by a set of very specific factors. Childhood environments that required you to read others' moods for your own safety created highly attuned nervous systems. People who grew up in unpredictable households, where a parent's emotion could shift the entire atmosphere of a home, learned at a very young age to scan for signals before the storm arrived. That hypervigilance, which may have looked like a wound, also sharpened something. The nervous system that was trained to catch signals early became extraordinarily good at catching signals early. Trauma and intuition are closer than anyone wants to admit, but it does not end with trauma. Spiritual traditions across every culture in human history have described a capacity in human beings that sits underneath ordinary perception. The ancient Greeks called it gnosis. The Hindus called it prajna. Indigenous cultures across every continent built entire systems of knowledge around the idea that reality communicates to those who have learned to be quiet enough to listen. Modern mystics and contemplative traditions, from Sufi Islam to Zen Buddhism to the Western esoteric tradition, all point toward the same practice: the deliberate quieting of the conscious, analytical mind in order to let a deeper knowing surface. What if these traditions were describing, in the language available to them, the same phenomenon that neuroscience is now beginning to map with brain scanners? The conscious mind is loud. It is the part of you that narrates, judges, plans, worries, scrolls, and argues. It is extraordinarily useful. It is also, in terms of raw processing power, the smallest part of what your brain is doing. Estimates vary, but researchers suggest that conscious awareness processes something in the range of 40 to 50 bits of information per second. Your unconscious systems process somewhere between 11 million and 40 billion bits per second. The conscious mind is a single voice in a vast choir that it can barely hear. When you learn to quiet the voice, the choir becomes audible. This is why meditation changes things. Not because it opens a portal to another dimension, because it trains the conscious mind to step back far enough that the pattern recognition signals already being generated by your deeper systems can finally break through into awareness. The person who senses danger before it arrives, who knows before they are told, who feels the shift before anyone speaks, they are often simply someone who has, through practice or necessity or natural temperament, learned to hear what the rest of the mind is always saying.
There is one more layer, and it is the one that science finds most difficult to discuss. Human beings are not isolated processing units. You are a social species with a nervous system that was designed to be in contact with other nervous systems. Research in the field of interpersonal neurobiology, developed in large part by psychiatrist and author Daniel Siegel at UCLA, suggests that human nervous systems are exquisitely tuned to one another in ways that go beyond ordinary communication. When you are in the presence of another person, your physiology changes. Your heart rate begins to synchronize with theirs. Your brain waves show measurable patterns of entrainment. You are not separate systems sitting near each other. You are two systems in genuine contact, exchanging information through channels that neither of you is consciously managing. What you feel when you walk into a room and know something is wrong may not be your intuition generating predictions about the future. It may be your nervous system reading the nervous systems in that room
with an accuracy that your conscious mind, focused on faces and words, simply cannot match. You are always already in contact with more than you can see. Some people are better at reading that contact. Some have trained themselves, deliberately or through necessity, to trust what arrives before the explanation does. Some have had the experience enough times and with enough force that they have stopped requiring the rational mind to validate the signal before they act on it. And some have simply never been taught to dismiss what they feel. That is the quietest truth in all of this. You were not born with a diminished capacity to sense what is real. You were taught over years in classrooms and conversations and rational frameworks to discount the signals that did not arrive with evidence attached. You learned to call it a coincidence. You learned to call it anxiety. You learned to call it nothing. But the signal was always there. You have felt it before. That certainty before the evidence. That pull without explanation. That knowledge that arrived in your body before your mind had assembled the words for it. The question was never whether you could sense things before they happened. The question was whether you were willing to listen.